What's up, everybody? Thanks for checking out the video. This is the next installment in our faction overview series for Warlord Saga of the Storm. This faction we're going to be covering is Elves. We've done, I'm not even going to name them because it's starting to build up how many we've done so far, but it's great. I love covering these, and I hope that they're a help to you guys, whether you're a new or a returning player. So as usual, we have our co-host Graham, and we have a faction specialist, so that's somebody who in the Warlord community has played this faction a lot, even if it's not, the only faction that they play, because there are very few people that we can find that strictly play one faction, but somebody who has a pretty good grasp on the faction, what they do, and kind of some of the ins and outs of it. So our faction specialist this time around is Temperance, but I'll go ahead and bring Graham on.
Hey everyone, I'm back here again to talk to Temperance. We're very lucky to have him. Temperance has been battling at the top of the elf leaderboards all year. He's won a tournament with noted powerful elf Recursion, and I believe he is the only person to win 2 online circuit events consecutively in October and November of last year. So it's a pleasure to have you on, Temperance.
Oh yeah, thank you for letting me be here.
All right, so we'll go ahead and just dive into it then. We're talking about elves, and before we get into any specifics, I want to know, why should someone play elves? Why do you play elves? What's good about elves?
Sure, so the way Elves started was sort of when the first Saga of the Storm decks came out. A friend was picking them up at the store and said he had elves and dwarves left, and I ended up with elves, my brother ended up with dwarves. And I've sort of stuck with them ever since. So, some things that you might like if you're playing elves. Well, they're pretty good at drawing cards. There are some other factions that can do it. In the beginning, it was pretty much just elves that could draw cards. But they still have quite a few characters who can get some card drawing going. A lot of the warlords, you see Belial and Sanganel out there, both have extra cards. You've got the Lost Bride, Elamir. Hasamal's not a standout, but if you really want to draw, you can run him. Dedelia's not around anymore, but that was also a card draw. They also have a lot of range strikes, so if you like doing range strikes, it's a good choice. They tend to do well being aggressive. If you want to do that, I frequently do that. And sort of the other thing they tend to do well, and really one of the only factions that can do much for it, is recursion, so bringing characters back from the discard pile.
Perfect. And I think you started to even hint at the answer to my next question, which is, besides what elves do well, what elf deck types are currently dominating? Like if an elf player, if someone's looking to start elves with a strong type of deck, what should they go for?
Sure. I think you've got a few options, and then within each category there are different ways to do it. But it does line up pretty well with the reasons to play elves. So you can make some pretty aggressive range strike based decks. So sometimes that's mostly characters, sometimes it's heavy on the spells. You've got some strong wizard warlords like Sanganel here, or Fade Rowan, people like that who can really toss a lot of quick spells out, backed up by a lot of the heavy range strikes that the elves can generate. So I think that's one of the types that can do pretty well, and that's basically what I was doing with that Recursion deck, was just generating lots of strikes very quickly and try to take out the opposing warlord before they can whack all of your very squishy characters, because that's something elves do not have, is hit points.
Except for Sanganel. But yeah. In general, the best defense is a good offense for the elves. When we're talking about these archetypes, then, we particularly spell blitz, but I want to talk about, some of the strongest specific warlords. who are out there currently for the elves?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, Songanel, Fade Rowan, pretty good at spell blitz. There's some other things you can do with spells also, and some of the rogue or ranger action things. Another archetype, I'm going to call it sniping, but it encompasses a couple different things, is using a range strike, usually scout or ranger. You're going to reach out, find their warlord wherever they are, using rank increasing strikes, and just try to do one big one and take them out.
Do you have a warlord you'd recommend for that style?
I think Cathal Rowan is solid. I like Ivalis. I think she might be one of my favorites. I think those are both decent choices because they can reach out and snipe, but they can also just generate some strikes if you need to shoot the front. One cool thing about the elves is they have some alternate ways to sort of get the warlord wherever they're hiding. One of them that we see a fair amount is Fell Blow. So that's a spell. Let the necromancer make a melee strike anywhere they want to go. Usually people will combine this with Vorpal Blade and either Light or Glyph of Fate to ensure that you get a 20 to trigger Vorpal Blade and just make an automatic kill. The warlords that tend to do this best are Fade Rowan, since he is already a cleric and rogue and a necromancer, so he can equip the Vorpal Blade, and then just needs to draw the Fell Blow and generate a 20. And then Corios is the other one because he can generate his own critical successes, but he needs something like Battle Ring to make him into a fighter so that he can equip Vorpal Blade.
Awesome. So we've talked. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say there's one kind of other way that people do it sometimes, and that's with Avarisk Glenn. Because Avarisk's react can work on any spell that he scribed. So you can use some of the spells that aren't inflicting wounds but are not rank restricted when targeting and respond for that.
Yeah, Avarisk won our first online world championship.
Mm-hmm. We have since made some changes so that particular version of the deck is no longer possible.
So yeah, we've talked about some wizards. We've talked about rogues. Now for I realize those are the dominant elven classes, but for our players who might be interested in elves, but also fighters or clerics, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, so one of the strongest clerics is probably Belial that you have pulled up here. He's certainly an elf and plays some elves. Sometimes these guild leaders, as we call them, will end up having characters from other factions as well, since they ignore the loyalty penalty. So if you're wanting to keep it pure elf, you could also try out Rustique Umbala, who lets you do some cool stuff with undead, which is the subclass that the elves have.
Yeah, we'll talk a lot more
Rustique-
about the elves undead characters as
Yeah.
we get into the character base.
Rustique is cool because he's giving you a passive buff there and some movement, which is something elves don't typically have much of. But he's also, interestingly, a level 5 cleric who is also a necromancer. So not a lot of warlords out there who have a subclass that is not generally aligned with their base class.
Yeah, there are some that offer a lot across class lines. Paladin and Bard jump to mind.
Yeah,
Necromancer's not one of them.
Yeah,
Or if it is, it's cleric spell.
Yeah. So these are two of the strongest, but you do have some other options that are good as well. But if you want to try one out, I'd recommend these because you can do some different things with them, and they're pretty strong without having to try out some really crazy stuff.
And then in terms of fighters, the elves have 2 1/3. Probably just one worth talking about.
Yeah, I mean, so I think we might have 3 1/3. The third, I'm guessing, is Icarus. So,
Yeah.
Poor Icarus, cool idea, but his level is just so low. But, so you've got Lord Winter, who's probably what we're going to talk about the most. But you also have Jolan Yu, who is a cool ranger. And then there's Ophinicus as well, who has a cool ability, but it's not managed to perform particularly well. But those, I believe, are the only options available.
I'm one of the weirdos that likes Winter Eternal better than Lord Winter, but maybe that's just because I started playing during 4E.
Oh, yeah, the alternate version of Winter is also cool, getting to use the different water actions.
And just while stunned is a big one. I mean, you can just stun him up. Obviously, Lord Winter, we'll get to starts as well, but has the nuclear Winter start as an option. But they're just, they're different enough as the once per turn versus the doing it while stunned and whatnot. Yeah. They're both good in terms of elf fighters.
Yeah, Winter Eternal, you're going to be focused on healing in the long game. Lord Winter, you're going to try to get 20 hit points on one turn and kill them on that turn before you die.
Exactly. Do we want to talk about the classless elf warlord, since that's not common amongst factions? I don't think it's something we've covered yet outside of obviously multi-class, and because he is one that sees some play.
Sure. Yeah, this is definitely a guy worth knowing.
We can bring up Raziel.
Raziel is a jerk. Graham, do you want to talk about him?
Sure, yeah. I would say if your idea of fun is making sure the person you're playing with is not having fun, then Raziel is the warlord for you.
I just figured I would ask you to go over him instead of Temperance, since you play devs as well, so...
Wow, there's some slander going on here, but Raziel, basically allows you to run infinite tech, all sorts of weird one-off solutions to random things, cards that are situationally very good and situationally useless, because you can take any card and just pitch it to get rid of an opponent's card. And I think he really came into prominence when Isadra came out, who gets to turn that random discard a card from an opponent into 2 ranged strikes, first action with +4. So you're shutting down their options and you're taking a quick lead in tempo, and it can be a brutal deck to play against.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I recognize that playing against Raziel can be unpleasant. I do like that you can play him and have a chance against almost anything because you're able to take random cards from their hand.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I like, because I feel like with some of these other options, you could get a really bad matchup and have very little chance for winning. But I feel like since Raziel is taking random cards, largely independent of their strategy, you have a shot against most decks.
All right, so we've talked warlords. Let's talk a little bit about the rest of the cards you're always going to see in the game, the starting army. So, Timber, who are your favorite level 1 characters to start? So you've got a few of them up there already.
Yeah. You've seen I've pulled up 4 level 1s and 4 level 2s, and these certainly aren't all of the options. These are just ones that we see a fair amount, ones that I like. And I've paired them here because I typically play them as this combination, but it's certainly not the only option, and a lot of these characters do well on their own. So
yeah, do you want to talk us through each of the pairings?
Yeah, I think that might be a good way to do it. So, on the left here, I suspect anyone who has been playing online recently has run into Javan. So, any level 1 or any starters that our planer can end up buying you a lot of time if your opponent is rolling the odds. And I like pairing Javan in particular with Biting West Wind. So they're both undead, they're both planar, and their abilities mesh well together, I think. So Javan's React lets you attach her to the character who's killed her to make that one not support ranks. And by messing up their ranks, you're making it more likely for them to have characters fall forward and spin and stun, allowing the West Wind to do its react.
I will say one thing that I think is very underrated about Javan is that 6 AC is actually pretty high for a planar character, and a lot of planar characters who have 1 or 3 AC. There's really, you can play buffs on them, like Elves love Wheel of Death, clerics love Mass Blessing, but it's really not that impactful when it comes to the AC. But when you're pumping a planar character's AC up to 11 or 12, that's pretty significant. So they do receive buffs better than a lot of other planar characters do.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like most of the other starting ones you'd have tend to have 4 or lower, and there are, like you said, a lot of 1s.
Yeah.
I mean, to your point, the level 2 behind Javan is sitting at only 4 AC planar.
Yeah.
Okay. How about Skyrek Bone Golem?
Yeah, this is another combination you will see frequently played together. Bone Golem gives you sort of one of the few ways to have sort of more hit points or durability in your starting army as an elf. Now, a fair number of the warlords are necromancers, including the cleric warlord up here, Mystique. So you can spend any necromancer as a react to reduce wound coming into the bone golem, and you can do multiple wounds on the same bone golem by spending multiple necromancers. So that's a way that you can get some healing in.
Can you? You can't do the same react to the same strike.
Right. Sorry, let me clarify that.
Okay.
So, as opposed to something like Gunda and Nothrog, where Gunda, each individual Gunda is only going to be getting the extra hit point once. So the bone you can for multiple strikes. I don't.
Gotcha.
I mean to say, a strike coming in for 2 wounds at once, you could spend 2, but it's not limited the way stealth or something like that is, just doing it once per character per turn.
Yeah, this is obviously, a solid defensive start for a faction that isn't great. Solid defensive starts, although I think we have arguably 2 better options for defensive starts here. The thing that I personally, as someone who really only plays elves through necromancers, don't like about this is because it's only as good as your necromancers are unspent. And for me personally, at least, I want to be spending my level 2 wizards. I want to be casting from dust to dust. I want to be doing all sorts of things. I don't necessarily want to have to save them to protect my 9 AC, 1 HP frontliner.
Sure, that's fair. And I think that if you want to run the bone golems, then Skyrek is probably the necromancer you want, since Skyrek doesn't have a built-in other reason to spend. You may still be drawing something you want to spend to cast. And then Skyrek, if Skyrek does end up falling forward, the react is still usable while stunned, and you have the bone golems ready to come back. This start often works well if you are trying to bring back some other characters that you can no longer start with. Ardenalis, namely.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about Ardenal.
But this is an option. If we want to move on to the next group here, we have Amatria Tansik and Earloss. This is one of my favorite starts because they can both generate some modest strikes. Plus 2s aren't huge, but it's not nothing. And they each have a react that lets you actually generate an additional strike when they die. So I like something like this if I'm anticipating other decks being aggressive, because you get to shoot back, basically, and help take out some other things.
Yeah, if you're up against a defensive start, you can still attack. If you're up against a scrappy start, you're going to scrap back harder. Your characters all do double duty.
So I like it because you have a decent shot against both aggressive and defensive decks.
And then we've got our stealthy boys over here.
We do. There are some other stealth options in the game, but these are two of the stronger starters. They both have stealth +8. You know, originally they were both made when stealth worked differently. So this is a start where you have the potential to cancel a bunch of strikes coming at you, but you know, they do have some decent aggression as well. Wythian's taking +2 range strikes. Again, not huge, but a decent shot. And Darius's +0 is on the lower side, but it's still a strike, and they both take buffs well for Mass Blessing or Wheel of Death. Now I know there are a number of players who do not like using this start because they feel like they fail their stealth checks all the time, which I understand. It's frustrating to fail your stealth checks for sure. This start is not something you want to do if you have been rolling poorly a lot.
My opinion is that if you feel that way, it's because you haven't been starting it enough. The more you start it, the better the odds are you'll get some good rolls, in my opinion. But to each their own. I think you've really nailed it here. There's one other starter that I think is quite meta and quite common that I want to make sure we talk about, and that is Kinnel, who dwarves, Nothrog, mercenaries. 2 hit point starts are very common. Kinnel is the elf answer to it.
Yeah, very strong, sticking with that +2 range strike that they like on their level 2s. Kinnel additionally can work very well in decks that are doing the spell blitz by generating additional strikes. I mean, you could wipe out someone's front rank by tossing a couple cards to an Evoke Crisis with Kinnel. That's not a bad way to take out a bunch of Gundas or Brine Fiends with their low AC but multiple hit points.
I will say also just any character that can one-shot a Temple of Lore is worth thinking about.
Yeah, and really, Kinnel's probably worth playing just for the art.
Yes. All right, so we've got our warlords, we've got our starters. I want to talk a little bit about some of the other kind of key elf characters to be aware of when building a deck.
Yeah, there are quite a few. I had some trouble narrowing this down. There are a few we definitely want to hit on.
Yeah, let's pick maybe 5 or so big ones, and then we can mention some others that are related to the archetypes those go in. Yeah.
Well, one that people frequently don't want to see on the other side and has been restricted down to a single copy is going to be Capix. So Capix is a lowly level 1 here with +0 attack, 11 AC, 1 skill, 1 hit point. But she does have a react when she comes in. Discard any item you want within 2 ranks. So it doesn't matter, there's no skill check, there's no DC saves. Just comes in, and if they have a character, frequently the Warlord, in the 1st or 2nd rank, item's gone. It's pretty strong for a 1st level character, not needing any additional thing. The only restriction is the rank.
Yeah, it's
and
miserable.
You can always just attack. So probably good that we're only allowed 1, especially because you can search Capix up with Dust to Dust, the Helm of Undying that you pulled out here, and a variety of other recursion cards can let you bring Capix back multiple times, which can end the game really against any sort of build deck that's relying on having a number of items.
Absolutely. Yeah, as a frontline fighter against elves, you just have to get up there and pray.
Yeah.
There's really nothing you can do against Capix. Just sit there and wait for it to happen.
Yeah, and there are plenty of times when I'm playing Capix, their Warlord is sticking back in their 3rd rank, not going to be in range of Capix. But, worst case scenario, Capix is still a character who has a strike.
Never useless. Any ability is better on a character than an action, and destroy an item within 2 ranks. It's a crazy good action. I mean, if that was a level 1 action, everyone would play it.
Yep.
Just like you talked about everybody failing stealth checks with Tyrius, whenever I run Capix in a deck, I feel like my opponent is either in rank 3 or just doesn't have items.
Yeah.
It's still a very good card, though. I'm not trying to talk dirt on it in any way.
Definitely. No. I mean, there are times I wonder if my opponent is staying back a little further just because they know Capix might be around.
Also, I feel like Capix is like single-handedly responsible for keeping Nodwick out of frontline decks.
Yeah, Capix being able to come down, if he could eat Nodwick and they lose 2 more, it's...
So that's Capix.
Yeah, I think most of my elf decks, when I'm making them, are going to start with a Capix. There are very few occasions where she gets cut. So, the next character I think I'd want to bring up is Vivian. So, Vivian, single hit point on a level 3 character, but she has marksmanship. Her range strikes, of which she gets 2, don't require spending, so she can come in, move up, take the shots, same turn without any additional cards. But yeah, so I frequently think of Vivian as the elf Jackals of Morn. She comes in, gets 2 strikes, same turn, doesn't need anything to support her. If you have some buffs, great. Vivian loves Archer Tower. Jackals are happy to get attack buffs up front. But anytime I'm being even a little bit aggressive, Vivian goes in.
How about for recursion decks?
So for recursion, I think as we mentioned as an archetype earlier, but it's maybe more than the other archetypes, dependent on having some characters in the deck in addition to the Warlord. So one of the strongest, strong enough to be prevented from starting and play anymore, would be Ardenalis. AC 1 hit point level 1. It's 3 attacks, pretty solid though. But this react is kind of nuts sometimes. So, whenever Ardenalis comes back from the discard pile, he gets to take a strike. And if he comes back ready, he may be getting another strike right after that. So, anytime Ardenalis dies and then comes back, at least 1 strike, sometimes 2. And elves have a number of ways to both kill their own characters and bring them back. I think that the character you've pulled up now, who is the next one on my list, is probably the strongest single character for bringing them back.
Oh yeah.
So Kargaz gets to bring a level 1 undead, which Ardenalis is, from the discard pile into any rank. That doesn't come up a lot, but there are some things that mess with your rank returning, like Correct Check on Nothrogs. Kargaz doesn't care. And Kargaz can bring Ardenalis back in twice, both when Kargaz enters and, as I mentioned, elves have lots of ways to kill their own characters when Kargaz dies.
Yeah. If you can consistently kill your own person, which elves have many ways to do. You're a necromancer, you're running Helm of Undying, you make a strike with Ardenalis, kill him, play Kargaz, bring him back, another strike with Ardenalis, attack with Ardenalis normally, that's 2 more, kill Ardenalis, kill Kargaz with Helm of Undying to get Kargaz back, that's 2 more strikes with Ardenalis, replay Kargaz, that's 2 more strikes with Ardenalis, kill Kargaz again, get him back, that's 2 more strikes with Ardenalis, play him again, that's 2 more strikes with Ardenalis. So these are, that's a 4-card combo, but it's all cards that work really well even outside of the combo. And if it goes off, that's with nothing else happening. That's 10 or 11 strikes for free.
And it's so powerful that Helm of Undying has been restricted to a single copy, and Ardenalis can no longer start in play.
Yeah.
So
and it's
still very viable, but understandably, we don't want it to be something that's easily guaranteed every time. So those two tend to be an important part of the base for any recursion deck, Ardenalis and Kargaz. And then there's one more character I wanted to bring up, and that's Dex Glenn. I think Dex tends to be a favorite for a number of reasons. One is just cool art. Upside down shooting. It's cool stuff. But Dex, I sometimes think about in the same vein as Amatria and Earloss down here. And it's sort of getting, reactive tempo shots coming in. So whenever Dex falls forward, he gets to take a +5 range strike, even if he's stunned. His built-in spend order of a +2 range strike, which Elves love, doesn't actually come up that much. Sometimes, but a lot of times what Dex will do is come into your formation that is looking pretty weak, immediately fall forward, take a shot, immediately fall forward again, take a second shot. So, with one card and one action, you get 2 shots and put only 1 hit point, but 14 AC straight up front to help hold stuff. And that can turn a game around.
The obvious comparison, I think, is Vivian, right? Who is also, 1 hit point, 14 AC, 2 shots. The difference is with Vivian, you play Vivian, you move Vivian up, you take 1 shot, you take another. That's 4 actions. So your opponent has all sorts of time to do anything. Over the long term, she's going to output more than Dex. But Dex comes in, shores up your ranks, and takes 2 +5 shots in 1 action. So, in terms of action economy, it's hard to think of better plays than playing Dex Glenn.
Yeah, Dex is a great tempo play. If the game goes an extra turn, Vivian's getting twice as many shots as Dex, but being able to take potentially 2 +5s immediately and be in a position to hold ranks right away can be a huge difference.
And even if even if he's just falling from 3 to 2, he turns your front rank, everyone in your front rank, into an air loss. Right? Because kill the front rank and Dex comes up, suddenly your second rank's under attack with a +5. There's one card I wanted to mention that I think, that maybe doesn't belong in a particular elf deck, but you have to have a pretty decent reason not to put it in an elf deck, which is the Lost Bride.
Lost Bride is a good one. So, she comes in at level 4, and she's got reasonable stats, maybe a little low for somebody coming in at level 4, but 2 strikes, 15 AC, 2 hit points, 7 skill. But she just react when she comes in, draw a card. Don't have to do anything special, just free replaces herself. Now, she doesn't work well with the recursion plan because she gets removed from the game.
Except that because reacts take place before static text, if you severed her or you consume from within her or some other way of saving her, she'll come into play again and draw you another card before she's removed. So she doesn't work universally with recursion, but when it does work, it's real good.
For single action stuff.
Yeah.
Can't bring her back a bunch of times the way you do the Ardenalis, which is probably good. I don't think we need a lot of extra help with drawing cards. But I think that was a good inclusion on the Lost Bride. Now, she is not inherently aggressive the way a lot of these characters are. So there are some decks where you might not want her if you're trying to go really quick. but she does get you a free card. So she's rarely a bad option, unless you have one of the warlords who says that you don't get to do that.
I will say also that just for, a level 4, solid stats, 2 good classes, drawing a card, she also has an ability that isn't typically relevant. Before she kills someone, she heals all her own wounds, but is actually really good with another elf warlord. Haviland Tansik.
She gives you a lot of the Haviland decks are frequently drawing a bunch of cards, so she fits with that already. And if she does get a whole bunch of hit points, then a single strike that she's making could remove 8-9 wounds from her.
So I mean that's just kind of niche, but for someone who's already quite solid to just have another good ability on top of that, always worth thinking about. And it's something, if you play against elves, you're going to see her, and it's good to remember.
It's good. And there's another part of that ability where she removes the character that she's killed from the game, which does not come up as being relevant often. But there are times where, especially against other elves, removing that character can make a difference.
Yeah. Javin.
Yep.
Versus Gyrek versus Ardenalis. Yep. So I'd say if you don't need all of your characters to be able to attack on the turn they come in, I think the Lost Bride's at the top of that list.
Yeah, I think should be a very strong consideration for most elf decks. Not every single one, but most of them.
Well, thank you for walking us through all that, Temperance. Any closing thoughts? Special considerations you have when building an elf deck, or just anything else about elves you wanted to have a chance to tell us?
I think they have some of the best art in the game, which is, always one of the cool things about Warlord. The art is great. And
Amen.
Lynn Hunter in particular has done the art for a lot of the most iconic elves, and she's really sort of brought the bone ridge above the eyebrows. It's a very distinctive thing here that I liked from the very beginning.
Yeah, I will say, Warlord certainly has unique elves. They're about as far from Tolkien elves as you can get. Wonderfully creepy, and yeah, the art always gets me excited.
Well, that'll go ahead and wrap up this video. Huge thanks to Temperance for coming on and sharing his expertise of the elf faction. And thanks again to Graham for moderating the discussion and kind of walking us through working with Temperance, seeing what makes elves tick. Thanks for watching the video. Be sure to like and subscribe for more Warlord content and for more of these faction overview videos.